joining us today. And we've got Walt Ostromecki, who's going to be presenting on the story of the U.S. trade dollar. So everyone's going to be muted for the presentation, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. You can do that throughout the presentation, either the chat or the QA box, and we'll read them. I'll read them to Walt at the end of the presentation. That way he can have kind of a back and forth with everyone based off of everything that he's presenting to us. So without further ado, Walt, the floor is yours, sir.
The floor is mine. Okay, well, welcome all that are listening. This is sort of a strange program. Not many collectors are involved in, I guess, collecting the U.S. trade dollar. And those that do probably don't know much about their history, origins, and so forth. So I want to take time to share with you this part, a little part of my hobby. Many of the items you're going to be seeing are from my collection. Oh, we go one thing. And I'll sort of whet your appetite with one of my prized pieces, a nice proof toning coin from 1873 as we begin here. But this is one of my prized pieces, even though it's got a scratch field. It's a beautiful coin to see. Okay, well, the origin and history behind the U.S. trade dollar. And it does, and I'm going to read slowly here, but you can also review it later on your screen as well. But in his annual report of 1869, Treasury Secretary Boutwell called attention to the growth of the government's, now notice here, mining and coining interests. He said that these now required a bureau to oversee, located in Washington, D.C., and to be headed up by an officer under his direction. He also recommended abolishing the coinage charge to discourage the exportation of bullion to foreign matters. Well, after several weeks of discussions, it says there, he asked John J. Knox, the Deputy Comptroller of Currency, to prepare a bill which would be presented to Congress that would include the new provisions and to establish a very important statute for the mint relative to our coinage. Now, this would continue beyond the year 1873 as we give the bill credit for. But the bill would be a grand revision of the Mint Act of 1873, which had grown obsolete by this time. It's amazing because of so many alterations and dispensing of other items and outmoded thoughts and ideas, including coinage production of all denominations. Ultimately, after many congressional debates, and of course, you think today we have them, they had them way back then as well. The revisions of the Mint Act of 1873 was passed. I want to share some points with you here. You can see in the green area, on the coinage side, the following changes were made. Number one, the office of mint treasurer was abolished. You probably didn't even know it existed. The duties were assigned to the various mint superintendents. Two, the Coinage Act charge of 0.5% was abolished in order to encourage depositors. The silver dollar, the Liberty type, weighing 384 grains, had long since ceased to circulate. Well, it did in more recent times for us as well, even though it wasn't silver, and it was discontinued. A new, and the word at that time that was used in the legislation was called a commercial dollar, later redubbed the trade dollar, weighing 4.20 grains, was authorized. 3/4 of a grain more fine than the Mexican peso, which tended to circulate around the world and bear that value on the reverse. 5, minor silver coins were to be replaced with uniform series of copper nickel metals based simply because they were widely counterfeited, the silver ones. The silver half dime would be replaced, of course, with a non-silver metal alloy and bear the 5-cent denomination, which had not happened until then, which would also denote a change from silver to another metal. No gold or silver coinage was addressed after congressional debate was added to the legislation, so it was accepted at that time. Also, the 1-cent piece was to remain bronze along with the weight changes of the subsidiary silver coins. For example, the half dollar was increased from what? 192 grains to what? 192.9 grains. And the similar happened to dimes and quarters proportionately. The 2-cent, 3-cent, half-dime donations were all eliminated. Again, after further debate in January and February of 1873, both houses of Congress finally agreed, and the Coinage Act of 1873 was passed on February 12, 1873. A note here before we proceed, however, the adoption of the new trade dollar, weighing 4.20 grains, turned out to be contrary to what it was expressed and its express purpose to be used, because it was included with the subsidiary silver coinage, those that we talk about in the area number 5, 6, and 7. And notice here at the end, which made the coin, what does it say in red? Legal tender up to $5. Now you can see why it might have been popular here in the United States. So 3 interesting notes here before we proceed. I got to get used to my new computer system here. These will come up together until I work on my system. But there are 3 interesting notes. Did you know that the trade dollar authorized, according to the Act of 1873, incidentally ended production of the silver dollar, the liberty seated, as we know at that time? Number 2, it led to the law's nickname, the crime of 1873. Can you imagine charging the government with a crime? Well, the Coinage Act of 1965, however, Title I, Section 102, the trade dollar was once again had a legal status in the United States as of 1965. I wonder how many of them were around. So I asked an expert in this area here. Down at the bottom, it talks about Ken Bressett. He was the retired editor of the Redbook. And I asked, I said, well, Ken, what do you think? What was the problem? He says, well, that status was there, you notice in the red, that was due to a mistake in the writing of the law and not meant to have legal tender intent. So Ken shares that with us. So what was the original intent or use of the trade dollar? Well, they were intended to be legal tender. They were not intended to be legal tender in the United States, but unfortunately were. Secondly, the extra silver weight was intended to match that of the Mexican silver coins, then favored in China and other Asian countries. So the U.S. trade dollar, we've got legislation. Well, what was the design? Where did it come from? And we find here that the designer of the U.S. trade dollar was William Barber. He was the 5th chief engraver of the United States Mint and produced many designs, including the trade dollar, the 20-cent piece, and numerous patterns. And we're going to get to see some of those patterns before the 1873 date about what a trade dollar or that international coin would use. Barber's son, Charles, succeeded him as the Mint's 6th chief engraver. So here at the bottom in red are some specifications dealing with the trade dollar. Alloy, 0.900 silver, 0.100 copper. Weight, 27.22 grain. Diameter, 38.10 millimeters. Here's an interesting thought. Edge, dentals. Well, we'll take a look at what those are. They're inside the rim on the obverse and reverse. In addition to that safety feature to keep it from being filed down, taking the silver taken out, it also had a reeded edge. In case you're interested, as we'll discover in our program this afternoon, there are 2 major die variety types. Type 1 from 1873 to 76, and type 2 from 1876 to 78. And that last group includes all circulated in proofs from 79 to 85. After 1878, there were no more regular issue strikes made, only proofs. So some of the Mint trade dollar designs, which you may not be aware of, I tried to list these by Judd patterns, who did the original story about them, from 1871 to 1873. Below here is a Judd pattern. I think some of these are nicer. This looks a lot like possibly considered a replacement for the Liberty seated, but it was a design that was credited to the Mint as a possibility because it has the word standard dollar on it rather than commercial dollar. So this was sold at Heritage Auction. Look at the price there, about $3,800. First, 1872, silver trade dollar. These are pattern designs again. Now, rumors persist, again, according to Ken Bressett, my resource here, that this was a pattern piece possibly made in China. There are no US government records of it, but the pattern exists. Again, on the left, you've got the pattern trade dollar, the obverse. Beautiful design. I like it a lot better than the settled on pattern. Looks more like an Indian chief rather than the feature of state of Lady Liberty. And on the right, you've got the pattern trade dollar reverse. Very simple design. I like where the tie-in is at the end down there near the bows. In God we trust. It's much nice pattern that most people are not aware of that led up to the trade dollar. Another trade dollar pattern. This one happens to be in copper. This is the Judd 1218. This is the obverse, very similar to the silver one, and the reverse design as well. So it might have been one done with the earlier one, which was in silver. Here are two more different patterns. Your Judd's 1217 and Judd 1219. But again, see the term that was used at that time, they were called commercial dollars. The bottom one looks like it's made out of lead, but it is made out of silver. Another trade dollar pattern, this is one that we'd like to see beginning in 1873, which perhaps the Mint should have kept. I like the design better as well, but it has the obverse. It's a Judd 1322 on the left, and you've got the reverse 1322 on the left. Notice the beautiful feel. I love the eagle holding the ribbon in staff. Oh, looks like dynamic. Look at Lady Liberty here, sitting on top of the world, has not a worry in her mind. And another 1873 pattern Judd. Again, very similar. This one is in silver, same pattern we just saw. So the first year pattern trade dollar type proof. Again, I'm going to interject proof and circulation because as we begin our story, they were interchangeable. This is an 1873 Philadelphia. This is a PCGS registry set. Wish I could own a coin, but I don't have that kind of money to pay for it. But it's a CAMEO proof. Look at the design. Proof 66 and sold for $21,000. Another beautiful. I like the eagle there. He looks like he's getting ready to take off and launch into space. Okay, I'm going to throw in a few counterfeits too. We'll go back one, take a closer look here at this registry trade dollar from 1873. And we'll know this is one of the common counterfeits, and we'll cover some counterfeits in more detail towards the end of the program. But notice the poor design relief, the pits, the dye marks, the fading rim dentals. And the dentals are on the inside above the stars, if you get a chance to see it. So it's up in here. Notice how they fade in and out. Not a very good, probably a cast piece most likely. And the back doesn't line up with the front. So there's a lot of issues to deal with it. So there's also damage here at 10 o'clock. So a later dated 1875 trade dollar pattern. Now there are patterns again after the second and third year of the regular trade dollar. And these had some minor variations, and I wanted to throw these in before we take a look at the standard trade dollar as well. This has a type 1 reverse, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But this is the Judd pattern 1426, and it's sold at Heritage Auction for almost $16,000. And the major feature, you'll notice there on the left, is above the date, the word "In God We Trust" was added there rather than the final design. So 1873 to 1878 trade dollars featured both type 1 and 2 obverse and reverse combinations. And I'll give you a chance to digest a little bit here on the screen. This is the very small design that came out of Whitman. So try to put it up here for you to look at it. We're going to talk about these two major type 1 and 2s die varieties. And we'll put them together. Now, these were circulation strikes. Die designs type 1 and 2. They were used at 3 U.S. mints that made the coins: Philadelphia, Carson City, and San Francisco. And I'll give you a chance to digest a little bit here, or you can review the program later. But on the left, we have a type 1 designs. And the arrows point to the features that we're going to be looking at. If you look at the type 1 obverse, you'll notice the fingers, much like the problem we had with the Lincoln cent in 2009. an additional finger appeared. Well, the original obverse design had only 3 fingers. And of course, the obverse side too, believe it or not, tried to blow it up. I'll blow it up a little bit later, but there are actually 4 fingers on that. And again, on the type 1 obverse, you'll notice Liberty's left hand down, there's a banner there, right, on the scroll, and it points to what? The left. Type 1. Type 2, the same design, it points straight down. So there we have the 1 type. And these types were interchangeable 75 to 76. So you could have a type 1 reverse of 1, type reverse of another date, or put the 2 of them together. The Mint used whatever master dies they had and shipped out at that time. And on the left, we see a type 2, which has the reverse design. Now it's hard to notice, that's why I put the arrows as thin as possible. But take a look at the 420 grains of 9 silver. Notice where the arrow, it's not quite to the number 2. Okay, and we'll find out the other point there, right at that little spot where the arrow points up above the eagle's claw, there's an extra berry added in on type 1. And the type 2, well, if you'll take a look there, and that's why I'm combining them both on the same picture. You notice the arrow goes over to about the middle of the 2. Little minor variations, and guess what? There's no extra berries there. So those were 2 major changes that Barbara did to this particular pattern to identify types 1 and 2. Here's some close-ups of die design combinations. On the left, we've got an 1873 type 1 obverse, 3 fingers, let you count them, and the banner pointing what? Down towards the left. In other words, a finger at the end on the right part of it makes a curve in. The type 1 reverse, the arrow, now look what happens here, the arrow moves to just this side of the 2, and of course there's the no berries. There's an 1876 S type 2 obverse and reverse type 2. This particular coin grades AU50, and unfortunately you can probably tell as if you're a seasoned collector, it has been cleaned sometime along the way. So on the right, on the left, we've got the type 2, the hand with the 4 fingers. Take your time, get your magnifying glasses out. You might want to count them. And the banner pointing downwards. Tried to blow up the coin so you could really get a chance to see some of these. Type 2, the one on the left, has the extra berry under the wing. About the claw, and also notice the number 2. The arrow points over to the top of it. Again, the value difference between the 2 types and 1 to 2 is minor. We're talking $15, $20, even for a high grade coin. This is one of the higher circulated grades that you're going to get. So all the design features are here that we've talked about, and I'll let you read them just for a moment, but it talks about on the obverse, Lady Liberty sitting upon a throne of bales. Now those are bales of what? Well, probably hay. Left, her foot is bare. Interesting. She's not wearing a sandal this time. Behind the right arm sheath, and wheat has extended to the rim. So it extends to the rim. Up in here, we're talking about. She holds an olive branch, symbolizing peace. In her left hand, a scroll with the words Liberty coming on down. I hope my arrows are working. Beneath the throne is the banner in here, above the date, In God We Trust. And it's interesting to notice that in the background, if you look at the right foot, which is hidden, there's actually a sea behind her. There's a sea waves that are in there, and they reach out to the 13 pointed stars in each one on the left side of the coin. And notice there's 6 stars on one side, 7 on the other. And we talked about the dentals. You can see them just to the right of the star before the rim, which is a reeded rim. Doesn't show very well here, but this outside rim is reeded. That's why I made it an oval so you can see the reeding as well. The reverse of the eagle happens to be in a very naturalistic style in nature. It's got its wings there spread. It's waiting for something to happen, it seems like. And notice the right claw around the arrows. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. And then, of course, there's 3 berries, 1, 2, 3. And the weight in grains and the design. And reverse looks much better. This particular one here, we'll get to some grading tips in a bit. This is also probably around an AU 50 to 55. Now, you probably noticed in the back that there's always been a problem, or will be, from the master die shipped in Philadelphia. Above the eagle, there's the banner E pluribus unum. And unfortunately, the E in many of the cases, which is far to the end left of the banner, doesn't show up on the master dies. Now, it shows up more prevalent, believe it or not, on the Carson City one for some reason. Don't understand it, but maybe their #1 press had a little different pressures. It shows a little bit of difference, so you can see a lot more of it. But usually the E is just got a blank space in between it, and then pluribus is there, as we'll see as we move along today. So some basic mintage figures. Circulation strikes of trade dollars, you might want to call those commercial, were produced at 3 different mints from 1873 to 1878. They, of course, were Philadelphia, Carson City, and San Francisco. And we'll take a look at each of these. Also, the proof dollars were produced only at Philadelphia in very small quantities. Now, you'll see an asterisk there about quantities. Again, I asked for information about this from, again, Mr. Ken Bressett, the retired editor of Redbook, as to why he called them guesstimates. Because the mint did not keep any figures in their records of proof strikes being done. So these are estimates given, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along when I get to the proof particular issues. So why proof dollars? Well, again, Mr. Bressett here we see his comments, probably for collectors of the time, as none were listed in the Philadelphia Mint Director's Report, and believed they were not part of the regular issue. Hence, they had no true records. So if it says 500, there may be 50. We don't know. The 1884 and 85 trade dollars were unknown by collectors until about 1908. After 1878, all were specimen, what they call specimen proofs. Mintages and figures were listed only as estimations. One additional note here as to one of the latter years, additionally, about 45,000 trade dollars were melted on July 19th of 1878. And many of these are suspected to be, according to Mr. Bressett, 1878 CC1 dollars. The law authorizing them was repealed in 1887, excuse me. So here's just some mintage figures. These are can be found well in the Red Book. But notice the first year, just some nominal specimens were struck. But it's interesting to note that Philadelphia sort of dropped off the radar in producing regular circulation strikes. Now, many of these probably actually did circulate in the area of Philadelphia or on the East Coast. Now, if you notice there, starting in 1874, look at the CC I've highlighted, 1.3 million. Look at San Francisco, 2.5 million. And then again, look in 75, you find 1.5 million. Carson City, well, what did we have there? We had the silver Comstock load, which still has, and you'll notice they start diminishing in Carson City productions as the silver loads began to wane there in Nevada. So at 76, it goes down, 77. But take a look at 78. Looks like the Orient was rich with our trade dollars. In fact, San Francisco had 9.5 million. That's probably the highest ever. As we move into 78, we find there's 0 minted at San Francisco. Then it comes down to what we just spoke about a few minutes before, the 97,000 done at Carson City, and the 4 million again done at San Francisco. So here's some of the proof strike information for you to digest, all done, of course, at the Philadelphia Mint. I'll remind you the figures are estimates. But we find that most of those during the regular circulation years of the commercial dollar or the trade dollar, the regular trade dollar issue, they were roughly between, let's say 500 and 900. But again, the 1 year exception was 1876, about 1,100 specimens, and possibly because it was a centennial year and or collector demand might have increased because that same year, that particular year. Yet very few of these that particular year have been recorded by grading services. Kind of interesting. Starting in 1879, of course, they were proof-only issues. And you can see they go down slowly, slowly, slowly. And if you look at the population, again, of grading service, we find, around 25 to 50 of each of the ones from 1879 to 1883. Now, as we noted earlier, the last two issues, 1884, it's suspected is 10. Grading services have seen 2 of those. And 1885 to 5, there's only 2 of those have been seen by grading services. So the figures could be a little bit lower. And we'll get to cover those 2 rarities as we move along this afternoon. So what are and why are there CHOT marks? You probably heard the word on U.S. trade dollars. What were they there for? What did they symbolize? Well, people collect certain dates by CHOT marks. And we'll get to take a look at that in just a bit. But before we do, let's take a look at some facts here. Well, these are small symbols. They're hand stamped into, not added on. Many counterfeits have them added on top, not stamped in. So keep that in mind when we come to the counterfeit portion towards the end of the program. And they represented the mark of a banker and a declaration that the coin was genuine first and actually had 4.20 grains. But I often wondered, well, if they stamped something into it, a few minor grains might have been taken off the coin. Anyway, it worked for the Chinese government and throughout Asia. The U.S. trade dollar facilitated trade with China and the Orient. And they all approximated the weight fineness of the Spanish dollar, which, of course, fell out of favor thanks to the U.S. trade dollar, especially in the Far East. CHOT mark coins are fascinating, but they are often valued less by collectors and shunned in favor of the high-grade pristine coins. But I have a lot of those particular CHOT marks in my handing, as well as, let's say, several hundred counterfeits. And we'll get to the counterfeit portion a little bit later. But CHOT mark dollars were not redeemable, period, by the U.S. government. So that was one deterrent. So they probably had to be melted down for their silver value. Well, let's take a look at some examples of CHOT mark, excuse me, U.S. trade dollars. Here we have 2 different issues. On the left, an 1873 S trade dollar with multiple CHOT marks, different designs, different banks. Now, if you look at those, you wonder, well, are they raised? No, they're in cuse. It's hard to tell, but they are chopped into it. But the particular designs make them look like they're put on and added to it. That's the obverse. Here's a reverse of an 1876 S on the right with a few CHOT marks. And you can also see these. There's dents you can see from here towards Liberty's knee on the left of the coin from the reverse. So you can see that they were actually chopped into rather than put on top. But an interesting one. And of course, some more CHOT marked examples. These are all CARSON cities. One is a registry set on the set. On the left, MS-63. Now, grading, the CHOT marks do not technically interfere with the grading of a coin, but they can be a deterrent. And on the left, we have an 1875 CC XFAU with CHOT marks as well. Just to give you an idea, but if you notice here, the CC Mintmarks tend to be, if you look on the left, barely visible, spaced far apart. Different die, different year, 1870. Now notice here the 1875 one, a big, large, bold CCs are on them as well. So we might want to look at some mint marks being punched into the dies at the various facilities. Remember, Carson City had only one press, and it still puts out tokens today when you can visit the Carson City Mint at the museum there in Carson City, Nevada. Here's some of my favorites. The 1878 obverse is, we want to call, you fry French fries that are loaded. You put chili and cheese on. Well, this one really got loaded. I often wondered, well, if that many CHOT marks are there, it had to take some of the grains off it. Why would they do that? It's kind of funny. There's no real answer to that. But on the right, we've got an 1876S, obverse and reverse loaded as well. And this gives you the opportunity to see the kind of destructive effect it has on the coin itself. Now, grading these, I wouldn't even attempt to grade them. I don't think any of the major grading services probably would do that as well. But it's just a nice little thing to show. A lot of them were San Francisco that had CHOT marks on it. Okay, U.S. trade dollar regular strike basics. Well, again, I just wanted to give you a little virtual tour beforehand. But I wanted to take you back just a couple of years before that, especially at least 1 year, because I wanted to start our virtual tour, which actually began, in my opinion, in 1872. Next to the last Liberty seated dollar here. This is a design. I wish I had this one in my collection. It's a beauty. But this is the Liberty seated dollar, 1872 Philadelphia. MS64, and I believe this is a PCGS graded coin. Shows up. And the value today, roughly about 6,500 plus. Very pristine, very, very sharp detail. Beautiful, no problems with the banner in gold we trust, and God we trust. Okay, the last 1873 Liberty seated dollars, Philadelphia Mintage, high, Carson City, 2,300. And look at San Francisco, wow, 700. But not a single one of those is known in any collection today for the Liberty. So it's fun. You can get a chance to perhaps search for one, put one in your collection, be one of the first to have something as a rarity. As to what happened to them, were they melted? There is no information, again, according to Ken Bressett. But the last year issue, you can see it on the left, and the last year issue of the Carson City, this one is in my collection. Actually grades, I think, XF40, but I'll take the grading service, ANAX of X45, worth about 12,000 plus. Tough issue to find. So now let's move on to the trade dollar, which is our actual talk, and begin with the 1873. And I'm going to label them as business strikes, which are called commercial strikes or just trade dollar strikes, versus the proof strikes. So try to keep them separate. Again, we're talking about the regular issues here on 1873. This is a type 1. This one is in my collection. I like it because its field has very few marks, bag marks or pits on it. So it's a little starting to tone a little bit on the golden side. It's hard to bring that up in a photograph here. On the left, we've got an 1873 proof strike, type 1 as well. Notice the toning here. This one's not in my collection, but the beautiful blue and green and purple and golden toning tells me there was a lot of oils used in that dye that day. It was sharp. So with the nitrogen being a certified holder, it tends to really start toning. 1873 first year strikes from Carson City and San Francisco. Here we get a chance to, again, I love that. I got a lot of the 1873 CCs and other years in my collection. And here we have the Mintage on the left, 124,500 silver. And most of the silver, as I mentioned, really came from the Comstock load. If you look at the arrow on the left, the mint mark is barely visible. This tells me, well, was it punched in enough? Was it worn? I don't know how long that reverse was used, but to make 124,000 coins, it probably was well used to begin with. So it might have very light CC. And of course, on the right, we've got the 1873S Mintage. And notice the bold big S. Now, there are also varieties. You can get fun with it. If you want to look at mint marks, can be punched in different spots, which tells me the mints had several dyes that they used. You can have a small S, a large S, or a bunched S, or a bushy S, as this one here shows. This one is from, what was it? Bar Antiques, who's a dealer on the East Coast. And I got this at practically nothing at auction from many, many years ago. 1874, the second year, we're not going to cover them all, but I just want to give you the first couple, and then we'll go to the last ones. Philadelphia, Carson City, and San Francisco. Again, on the left, we've got the Philadelphia issue, another beautiful toning coin. Wish I had this one too, but it's nice to be a collector when you can put together slides and programs like this, which show some of the beauties of our coins that are minted, several long time ago, different decade, different purposes. On the right, we've got the Carson City, a very high vintage. Notice there's some black carbon on the coins, both obverse and reverse. So this one has probably been exposed at one time to the elements, just a guess. And of course, the San Francisco one here, which even looks worse. Why does it look worse? Well, I'll tell you again, this happens to be a coin that was clean, and in all probability to make it look like a higher grade. With a high mintage like that, probably most of them were circulated. And we'll find out as we take a look at each one of these that the toughest grade for a trade dollar to find them in is what we call the MS 30 to 35 range, the VF. That's a very tough range to find. Other ones are all ranges, but that particular grade, you can see the harsh toning as a result of being cleaned at one time. So please, folks, don't clean your coins. I wouldn't even put them in water. Leave them like they are. Enjoy them the way they are. I mean, Liberty looks like she's really got a mask on there, right? To me, anyway, I get carried away. All right, 1878, last year of the regular issue strikes. Notice here, Philadelphia, 0. You won't see any. They didn't make any. Carson City, we talked about that particular mintage earlier. Probably a good portion of that was melted. There's a grade here of XFAU. My holdings, and notice the bold CC on this one. Interesting, but this one has a lot sharper strike. There's more. You can see all the curls in her dress and her robe. This is a very thing. Same for breastplate. That's a very sharp thing for San Francisco. For Carson City. San Francisco is on the left. Very nice piece. Now notice the S here, as we saw in the previous one. It's a much sharper defined S. So we know that, again, as these mint marks were punched in, this one is punched to the left. The other one was punched to the right. So you can have fun if you want to do that with your collection. And you can find the inexpensive ones, even in low grades, good, fine, probably $200 to $300 today, but make sure they're genuine. And we'll get to that in just a bit. So a couple of trade dollar era issues that are worth collecting and mentioning here. There are two major era variety trade dollars worthy of us to consider. First, 1875 S over CC reverse die. See, mint was very practical. It reused dies from other mint. I don't know how San Francisco got a die from Carson City, but they had it. Second one is an 1876 P reverse, a double die on the eagle. And we'll take a look at both of those. To me, this is having the fun with it. So here we have the 1875 S over CC trade dollar. Today's price at MS60 is about $4,500. Coin you see there pictured probably is around MS63 or so. But notice again the S moving farther. It almost is what? If you look closely on the left and then move to the right side, you will see what we're talking about. The S, bold S, fat S, thick S, and what call it. It's over one of the C's, but notice it's an SC. You can say you got a coin from the South Carolina Mint. We didn't have one, but it might make it interesting, talk a story or talk about it. But the one S blocks it, but the other one shows the C very distinctly being there. These run, and of course, the one on the right also is a huge die crack for America. So you can get into all sorts of little error parts if you like. Here's what we call the 1876 CCC double eagle reverse. Now on the right is about the size of the coin. On the left is about the size of the coin. I tried to point out, you don't see the features of double dies, but on the left, I blew it up as best I could so you can see. And if you look underneath the chin, you'll see an extra beak. Looks like he has. And you move down farther to the wings. On the left, notice extra wings. Right, extra wings up in here. Notice the extra space here in the arrows of extra arrows coming in below it. And we've got extra talons. Look at all those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right above the word grains. Same thing here. We find extra berries, extra leaves. Oh boy, there's all sorts of fun things. And again, notice the bold CC. The spreading is different. They're not equal. So when they were punched in by hand, this is a nice variety. This is a tougher one to find. Usually commands a good premium. We're talking somewhere, this particular one grades probably about XFAU grade. You notice E pluribus unum, as I mentioned earlier, is much sharper in the Carson City for whatever reason. The master die came out better. Doesn't show it on the regular side, but look at the one here on the right. So a quick overview of the trade dollar on counterfeit fakes. And as a potential buyer, a potential collector, anyone that's out there watching this, you have to be aware that I would estimate that for every one genuine silver trade dollar, there are hundreds of fakes made all over, from cast counterfeits, poorly designed, to even proof pieces. Most of these are made in lead. And I have a collection that I bought a number of years ago of counterfeit coins. And there are probably 200 trade dollars, most of them lead. Some were awful looking designs. You can find people on street corners saying, I'd like you to buy, just give me $50 for this silver dollar. It says silver on it. You got to know your trade dollars. And so your first thing when we come down to counterfeit detection would be to know that they are cast or made in lead. So you should be worried. And you want to make a difference? Well, you won't want to drop a coin, but if you hold it in your hand and feel it, a regular trade dollar is lighter, has a silver to it. The lead piece is much heavier, and you can do your density and gravity checks as well. But you can drop the lead piece and there'll be a thud. And I hate to say it, I don't want to drop it, but a silver coin will have a nice ring. So drop a dime or something at the trade dollar. You can get an idea what that ring sounds like. So there's a ring test you can give it. Of course, you can hit it with your fingernail too, but like me, I bite mine, so I don't have that opportunity. But so let's take a look. Well, gives you a chance here to weigh in if you wish to. Maybe you can, I think Nathan will probably keep an idea at the end, but what would you do if you saw this beautiful, not so beautiful maybe, 1879S trade dollar below, offered for sale at $150? I'm sure it sounds like a great bargain, and the picture here showing of that particular coin. So the coin is described, if you look on the left, as rare date. Well, most people say everything's rare. Now, rare, relatively speaking, I guess. Worn, discolored, from an estate sale. You can see them trying to build up a background on this thing, a pedigree. Asking price $125, or OBO, which is best offer. So what's the first major giveaway in theory? Now, we don't have the coin, so we can teach you the theory of it, then you need to actually have the hands-on part, that this coin is a counterfeit trade dollar. And I'll give you a few seconds if you want to put something in the chat side that Nathan can see. If not, we'll come to the end and then we'll provide you with the answer. But look at it. Nicely done, beautiful sharp coin. So let's move on and find out, well, why or why not? This is a very easy one, counterfeit. Answer, the date 1879S. Why? None were minted. Simple. So there's certain ways. I mean, I wish all counterfeits were that easy, but this is one I've seen a lot. I have several of these particular ones counterfeit. And if you look at where it says E pluribus unum above the top of the eagle, notice the whole background banner fades in. So this is probably a cast counterfeit, most likely. But how they got the dentals around the inside, they did a good job. Usually those are very weak or almost gone for some reason. And notice the S there. Looks like somebody added it over a bump. There's also a counterfeit bump there, which is hard to tell in a picture this way, but that helps you with it as well. So you did a good job. Got your first counterfeit. So trade dollar grading, guys, and I don't want to spend too much time here. I'm not an expert, but I'll leave it for you folks to see. But I wanted you to give an idea as we leave where the key wear points on each one from each grade were. And of course, here I'm going to let you read and enjoy it, and you can read it later too, but an about good AG trade dollar. And you can probably tell right off, well, yeah, it's got to be really low grade. Well, the arrows help you to look at some of the differences. The whole back, for example, on the reverse, the whole eagles, all one blob. I hate to use that word. You don't see hardly any feathers. And of course, here, look at the front on obverse. Here's 1877. I mean, she looks practically, unfortunately, I hate to say it, naked, without anything on it, but it's all the wear. So this coin is well circulated. And very little collector value, might be a temporary filler or just silver melt. We got probably what, $18 to $20 silver in it as a filler value today. So the next grade to move up is the good grade. This is the one that you can buy probably around $150, $200. And I've put the key points as to what to look at on each of on the obverse and reverse of the coin, and some of the things which you can look at to help identify the grade. And you'll probably see a lot of them in this particular lower grade. As I said, the most common grade you're going to see is probably XF, and we'll get to that in just a bit. But notice Liberty up above it. She's worn. You don't see any of the drapery except till it gets down on her legs. Her knee is completely worn. Notice the In God We Trust at the bottom and E Pluribus Unum are gone. The center one there on the left is for the banner is completely gone. You cannot read the word liberty. On the back, very few feathers show. The banner should be completely worn, so it might be a little bit better, but it's still overall grades of 4. You'll notice that about above the states, there's also a minting defect, like a little crack perhaps in the die for the dollar. The ush is mushed together. You can't tell any of the things. Let's move on to the very good grade 8. These are quite a different. And again, you can go back and see what it looked like there for the good. And then we can come back to the very good. So you see a little more hair detail. There's a few designs on her gown. Liberty's beginning to show there on the obverse at the very bottom. In God We Trust is showing up. And then again, now this one happens to have, because I collected it because it's a CC issue. It's also about 2% off center above the states of America. I don't mention that, but this is just something because, but notice here at the very bottom of the word trade dollar that the CC is just barely visible. I mean, it's all you would say. That's not, and looking under, I can't bring it up any higher because it's well worn, but it's completely gone. And the fine 12 is, again, you begin to see a little bit more detail as we go along, a much sharper In God We Trust on the left on the obverse. You see the banner of liberty. All the sheaves of wheat behind it usually are well defined. And again, here we can barely begin to see E Pluribus Unum now starting to show up around fine 12 or very fine, which we'll see in just a bit. Notice the eagle's wings where they're doing, and notice here the dentals too. This one happens to have a couple of dinks on it. But take a look also again. I love the fine. Look at this S mint. It looks like it's getting a little tipsy. Maybe the puncher had a little much to drink that day. But the S is already slanting to the left. Little things. This is an exact coin I received. I don't normally buy coins offline, but I had to have this one because it was just a nice design. Was it clean? We suspect it was not. It's hard to tell. This is the toughest grade to find in trade dollars. It might be something you want because there's hardly any difference. But again, take a look at the E Pluribus Unum. 3/4 of it will show. 3/4 of the feathers will show. There'll be a lot more detail for where Liberty's sitting on her throne or stone. I gotta move along here because I know we started a little bit late. This is perhaps the grade that you will find most often. Now, what I've done combined here for people who look at the program afterwards is XF is basically XF 40 to 45. So I wanted to be able to compare. Maybe take a look. These are both CC specimens. And the one on the right, the one on the left, excuse me, the different CC portions. It's over, the CCs are far over the dollar from the 1878. Here's a 78 again with the CC way over the word D for Mintmark. But notice that you can notice the full E in e pluribus unum on the reverse. On the 40, it's there, but not as sharp. So these two grades are tough to put. I tried to find ones of equal design, toning, and aging showing. And then the AU 50 and 55, I did the same thing for those that want some tips, because it's hard. Now, again, the one on the left, 1876, of course, is cleaned. It's obvious, at least to advanced collectors, even if you're not a regular. But you can notice how the background looks mirror-like. It isn't. It's going to start toning. It's going to start turning steel gray, and the coin in a number of years is going to begin to look lousy. I would not have it. Why was it done? Well, probably to get a higher grade out of it. Say, maybe it's an uncirculated coin. And again, here on the left, I put an 1873, 55. It's just a natural coloring. It shows a lot of wear, a lot of pits. But that does not really distract from the grade on the coin. That deals with the detail grade of the coin. And of course, there's an AU 58. I wanted to separate it. You can really notice the detail in the hair on the left. It's an NGC and AU 58. This with a very little bit of trace of wear, the very tip of the knee, for example. There's some. Then we got the reverse, very little trace of, but look at the detail in the eagle, even the upper wings. Just one little spot there on the right upper wing on the left. And again, a very different S. MS 60, 63. I just took these off of a part of my collection of NDC specimen for 63, blew it up so you can see it. But it's often many dull bags, scratch marks, just like with a regular dollar or coin circulated. MS 63, here's one that's pristine, has some sharp, again, it's a Carson City coin. Few trade dollar proof issues that we just covered. Here's one of the nice ones, NGC, MS 66, beautiful background. There's scratches. I often wonder how they get into a proof issue like this, but they don't really detract from the overall coin. So we didn't have a nice golden patina. Some other proof dollars that were coined at Philadelphia. Again, I try to, where I have slabs or certified coins, I put these in so you can see them. They look so much different. First year is the proof here on the left. Proof 79, the first year proof 64. So I had a good grade there. I didn't pay that much for that particular coin. But look at the head, Liberty. Boy, it stands out nice. I like just naturally coined silver coins without really toning. Two other dollars, we're getting down into the proofs. Here's an 1881 proof issue only, handful issued. Very nice design. Look at the detail, especially around Liberty feet, every little item. So the proofs look fantastic. In 1884, second to last year issue, I don't own this coin, but this is one of 10 supposedly struck. There, as I said earlier, I think there was 2 or 3 that have been seen by grading services. And of course, the classic of all classics, only one that has 5 struck. Well, there are 2 known. And one here on the right, it comes from the Eliasberg collection from 1885. It's a proof coin there, proof 66. Sounds like a Route 66, but this is the particular price for any collection. And maybe someday I might have the money to do it. Well, as we close out our program, there's also a fun part of the trade dollar part, and it's called a PATTE trade dollar. And these are from Tom Hollenbeck Galleries there in Colorado Springs. Tom and I have been friends for years, and I purchased these way back, 2007, that's right, at 125 a piece. But the PATTE design was just some people had fun with taking these particular coins. And if you take a look at the one on the left, she's sitting naked on a throne behind a wall. Okay. I don't know if she's scratching back there or what. I'm not sure. I'm not going to go into that. There's also a P on the right side. It highlights her breasts, and in fact, she looks pregnant. So designers that had fun with these, there's a lot of them. They're done by PD numbers, PATTE dollar 1, 2. Though these are types. There's some books done about these dollars, but they have no idea. People just enjoy doing them. And here's one even better, an AG3, but doggone it. I mean, she's really up there, isn't she? Just some things you can have fun with the hobby. And I don't own this last one, but I own the other 2. I have left them in the 2x2 that I got. And how do you make change from a trade dollar? All right. Here's one example. Thank you again, Tom Holland, for letting me purchase this a number of years ago, but it was one cut in half. And I thought I'd just throw it in the end here as we wind down. You just simply cut it into two 50-cent pieces or two halves. Anyway, well, that about does it for our trade dollar story. I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of history. It's not a well-collected area, but I think there's some fascinating coins within it. Here are some of the credits to the individuals, some of the coins, especially from David Lawrence Galleries, and from our own education director, Rod Gillis. Hey, Rod, I'll give you a plug here as well. Whitman Help, there's a Coin Help online, there's a Coin Leak IQ, US Mint Records, and of course, A&A Mint Holdings. So Doug Mott, our director, thank you, Doug. Anyway, Nathan, I will turn it back to you.
Well, that was awesome. I feel like I didn't know much about trade dollars until now. I was only familiar with one of the designs that I think I recall. I mean, some of them I don't know if I've ever seen them before. So I definitely learned quite a bit. There was a couple questions that I'd like to push through to you. I wanted to ask something real quick. I didn't understand that counterfeit that you showed with the what was it, 1879S?
Yes.
So I don't understand, if you're going to counterfeit something, why would you counterfeit something in a year and a mint that you know was never done? I mean, that's just blatant and obvious.
Yeah, but
do they get in less trouble?
Well, probably the individual that counterfeit that had no idea.
They just didn't know.
I would assume it was probably China, maybe, or
Sure.
just some guy on the street corner. You can go to India, and I was there a number of years ago. When I asked, I was looking at, he had a display of items, coins, and they attracted me. And I'm looking at them, probably 99% with counterfeits. And I says, he says, you look for something? I said, well, yeah, I'm looking for an $1804. I don't have, but come back tomorrow, I will have one. Maybe that better explains it, not knowing that. But like you, I like that one because like you've asked that question. I want people to think. Just an obvious one. And I wouldn't have noticed that myself unless I knew the vintage. Sure. So obviously someone didn't know it. They could have taken two different coins, cast, back from one coin and S. They may not be together, but here's the coin.
Yeah.
Here's the counterfeit. So the thing is, just beware, know your coins, and learn a little bit about them. I hope, Nathan, that sort of answers your question.
No, it did. It absolutely did. No, it's funny. I'll get an email or a phone call almost once a month that somebody has an $1804 and how much is it worth? And I just, I have to crush dreams all the time. But hey, go ahead.
I should have put out some other counterfeits. I have some nice, what were they, 1878 Denver issues?
Yeah.
With a D on it, you wouldn't believe. But they're all lead counter, obvious, People looking to make it quick. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we've got a couple questions. I don't mean to take up all the time, and we've got, quite a few folks still on the question or on the chat. So Ed was going to ask, did William Barber design all the patterns?
From what mint records show, yes. But there were also other individuals that contributed. So he probably took credit as the chief engraver.
Okay.
So a lot of those patterns never got any. I like some of the patterns that are in the final piece, which he also developed as well. So I would guess along that lines. That may not be the answer he's looking for, but that's the best I can do. The one from China, we don't know. As Ken said, we have no idea.
Sure.
It could be, it may not, because there's no mint records of it. Yet there's hundreds of them out there, and they are made in silver. And the weight is right for the time.
Sure.
So anyway.
Okay. He was also asking if we had any idea how many trade dollars were possibly melted by the Chinese.
Again, there's no record there too. There's no record of even the redemption, except for that one thing was in July of 19th of 1878 that roughly 45,000 were melted. I don't know. So we don't know. And we, as Ken Bressett said, we assume they probably a majority were the 1878 CCs that were around, but the mint doesn't keep very good records. That's why the proofs, who knows? I mean, there's 900. If a grading service has maybe seen 12 or 13 of any kind, that's not very many to make the 900.
Sure.
So that's just an area that's unknown.
Okay. George was wondering, do you think the trade dollar is undervalued, and do you think they will increase value in the future?
Well, if silver goes up, of course. That's an obvious answer. they're not widely collected. It's not very popular. A person may have it in his or her collection as a type form, one item. I like it because I like Carson City. I'm close to it. I've talked there many a time at the Carson City Mint. I've seen their products on the wall, close up behind press number 1. And to me, that's the lore of it. But as to whether they'll go up, well, coin values appreciate slowly. But I would suggest getting the XFAU grades. They will appreciate a little more. If you can afford the uncirculated, we're looking probably at about $700 to $800 range on some of the high mintages. Some of those with lower mint figures, well, they're going to have a little value, even in lower grades, down to the fine or very fine grade. So again, it just depends on collector demand, and there isn't that much. There was way back in the 70s a trade dollar collectors group, but I couldn't find any more information about it, what happened to it, who was involved with it. So again, but it just, to me, is a nice coin.
Yeah, no doubt. Ed asked one more thing. He said, if the U.S. didn't redeem CHOT mark dollars, how did so many wind up back in the U.S.?
Well, I don't know. That's a good. They probably were taken back because, remember, immigrants were coming to San Francisco, and I would assume that if they came from Asia or China, they would bring those trade dollars with them as their money. And since it was silver, they might have been there, and they probably were stacked away in the mint.
Sure.
But again, the mint would not take it from you or I if it had a CHOT mark. They would not redeem it.
Interesting.
And they don't, again, there's no explanation as to why, but probably because it lowered the silver content, or they just put those in a big pot and say, we're going to melt them all down. We know what the silver is at that particular time of price, so we just melted them down. That might be a good possible answer. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, I didn't see here. Let me double check the Q&A. I'll forward up there. I didn't see any in the chat. Was there anything else that you wanted to kind of end off on? And if not, I'll go ahead and close this out.
No, go ahead, Nathan. I'm taking a little more time. We got a little bit behind because of technical difficulties on your end.
Yeah,
that's fine.
I haven't seen any other questions come through. Like I said, I learned quite a bit just because I've not tried to intentionally seek out trade dollars for my collection. So I need to keep an eye out for these because they're very, very cool.
I'll bring you a couple of counterfeits, a summer seminar, and give it to you.
Okay. I'll see you there.
For that as well. But Nathan, thank you again for hosting, and appreciate it very much. And hopefully within a week, we will have your issue solved with getting another person on board. We're interviewing people for the e-learning position right now. So we're thinking we might have somebody soon. George did ask one last thing real quick. He says, where's the best source of proof trade dollars? I would say any reputable dealer. I'm not fond of buying things on eBay because I can't see it. And if you do, dealers have a lot of them in their cases. If you can get one you can hold, maybe even if it's raw, not certified, to take it out and look at it. But I would strongly suggest you having immediate contact with the dealer or somewhere on the floor, a bourse floor. Yeah, I mean, the larger firms like Heritage and so forth, they're going to probably charge you a little more, but there's a better pedigree there. There's a better guarantee for individuals, and the prices move up accordingly. So I just, and you can find bargains, of course, but I just like that 79S. You see that up on eBay. I'm not saying that was up there, but wow, I can't wait. It's like a telemarketer on TV. You got to buy this set of Buffalo nickels. They're bright, shiny. They whiz them all to heck. Put them in a beautiful purple case. It's only $199. We give you flex payment. And what's the value of the coin? $4 or $5. Yeah. It's just watch out for the hype. But I would also suggest that the individual talk to a dealer and find one that probably has a lot of trade dollars. A lot of them have them with Morgan dollars too, but they don't display many trades. And they may have them in a box in the back. But to sit time and go through them. Bring your loop, of course, make sure, looking for details that you want to have, but sit down. There's a lot of dealers right now at shows are just overwhelmed with buying since the pandemic. I've been to several shows and it's nice to do that, but hope that.
No, that's great advice. Well, Walt, I thank you. This was a great hour and very educational. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. And we hope that you will join us in future eLearning Academy webinars. So Walt, thank you again, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Walt, I'll see you here in a handful of weeks at summer seminar then.
Okay, yeah, this is my 10th one too, so that I've done too. But two of our candidates for the new position are watching this program because they wanted to see what an e-learning program looks like. So I'll be getting some critiques Friday or Monday because they're going to be, taking over this type of thing. Anyway, thank you, Nathan, for your time. Thank you, A&A, and keep going.